This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps and Discipleship Pastor here, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And before we go any deeper, I want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, you go ahead and do so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. This past Sunday, we had a guest speaker, our state pastor from the Church of God, Pastor Mitchell Birch, and he brought a message with us in this series of Headlock that we are in. And last week, you shared how having stuff is not the problem, but it's the stuff. It's when the stuff has a hold of you, and it really has you that is the problem. How is giving, which Pastor Mitch spoke of on Sunday, how is giving really the next step of when we realize that it's not about the stuff that we have, but how it holds us? How do we go from that to, okay, now let's give back?
Yeah, so here's how we go from week one. We talked about it's not about your possessions, it's about what possesses you. Mm-hmm. And then why the next step in this series for us, because remember, I said in week one of Headlock, I said, my desire is not for bigger offerings. Mm-hmm. I said, my desire is for your heart to be free. When your heart is free, then generosity takes care of itself. Now, here is what we need to understand about why the next step, why was it giving? What does giving have to do with the headlock and the wrestling match we talked about in the first week? Here's the connection point, is that if your heart is possessed by the temporary, if your heart is possessed by your possessions, then the only thing that the tool that God has given us to break that in our life is giving. Yeah. That's the tool by which it's been given. It's not, oh God, please just release me from this desire to have more and more possessions or whatever. That's it. The Lord will answer that prayer, but the way that he will answer it is just like Jesus answered the rich young ruler in week one. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to give if you want to be free. Mm-hmm. That's why giving is the next step. We have to realize giving, as much as baggage comes along with talking about giving and generosity in the church, because just flat out, people don't like it. We talked about it in the first week. It's an area of spiritual warfare, which means that a lot of times in series like this, we'll mishear things. Mm-hmm. We'll think that we heard something, or our heart will be just so conflicted that it's very difficult to really hear what's going on when someone's teaching on this topic. And so because it's so highly charged, it can be difficult to hear a message about giving, but that's the tool that God gave to unburden your heart. Yeah. Right. And so if the goal of the series is to unburden your heart, the way that God has done that is not just, he doesn't just go, all right, you're consumed with the temporary, you're consumed with possessions, you just need to pray more.
Right.
No, because prayer that doesn't ultimately result in action is not going to help with something like materialism, with being consumed with the Western culture. It's not going to be like something, you're going to have action. Right? Because if you told me, all right, at one point in my life, I was really materialistic, just I wanted everything I could possibly get, and the Lord set me free from it, and you didn't tell me about how you are now a person of generosity, I would go, I don't think the Lord set you free.
Right.
From it. These are the two things. This is how, there's all sorts of tools God has given us by which these strongholds in our life get broken. Giving is the one that breaks the back of materialism and greed in our life. So what we should see in yesterday's sermon is giving is a tool. That if you want to be free, the way that you show your possessions that they're not in charge is by giving them away. Yeah. That's how you go, okay, I'm not all about the temporary, what I can touch, feel, taste, and experience right now. I'm about what is to come. That's why Jesus even told the rich young ruler, he says, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, you'll have treasure in heaven. And remember, we said this in week 1, heaven is not some far off place where you're now having a savings account because you give to the church. That's not what he's saying. He's saying invest in things that are going to matter. Invest in things that are going to last. This is why Jesus says where your heart is, or where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Eugene Peterson, when he wrote the Message translation, translated that verse, it said, I'm probably going to mess up the paraphrase, but essentially he said, wherever your heart is, that is the place where you will most want to be. And so his point when he translated that in the Message was that if your treasure is all tied up in the here and now, then you actually value the here and now more than you do the eternal things of God. And so he goes, you got to flip that, right? I had this sermon a long time, it feels like a long time ago now, where I had cakes up on stage with me. And the whole point, because we were talking about giving, and I said the whole point is this, because you can actually, when it comes to the blessing of God in your life, you can actually have your cake and give some to others as well, right? Because the problem is not how much you have or what you have. The problem is what has a hold of you. And giving will be that tool that God can use in your life to ungrip whatever it is that has a hold of you. So when you think about giving and you feel, oh man, one of the points yesterday, the command of giving. If you don't like viewing it in that way, even though I do believe that generosity is incumbent upon the transformed life, if you don't like viewing it in a way of command, view it in a way of as a healthy practice. That this is the practice by which, if I want to get healthy in this area of my life, this is what's going to do it. This is going to put me in the best place possible for me to have my heart unburdened and experience the blessing of God in my life, which is what Pastor Mitch was talking about, is that when you put yourself in a position where you're giving, that yes, you've now put yourself in a position to where you now can receive from the Lord. And again, he said this multiple times, but again, it's very, very, very easy to miss these things in highly charged topics. The comeback is not just material. Right. It's spiritual in nature. What God has to give is spiritual in nature. Now, does he sometimes bless you financially because yes, that is. But, a lot of times it comes back in, our old Pastor Mark used to say this, I love this, the blessing of obedience is obedience. The blessing of obedience is obedience. Like, you know how bad it sucks to be disobedient and to know that you're being disobedient? Your heart is in turmoil. And so if you feel the command to give and then you don't give, your heart is always going to be in turmoil. And so one of the ways that the Lord returns back to you what you have given him is in a sense of peace of like, all is well because I'm living obediently. That's that. So it's not, this is what, this is a hard topic to cover. Because as we said, week 1, there's so much bad teaching and so many bad examples on this. This is why we don't slip into the prosperity gospel, which is it's going to come back to you in this exact way. Right. No. That's not what we're saying. The blessing of God and the favor of God is first and foremost spiritual, meaning this, that if you don't get anything else in life other than your salvation and eternity with Jesus, he's already given you more than what you deserve. Anything else above and beyond that, if he gives you peace, if he gives you comfort, if he gives you material wealth, if he gives you good health, anything else like that, you did not earn it. You did not put a hook in God's mouth by your offering and say, well, now you have to do it. No, that's not what we're saying. All we're saying is that it seems according to the scriptures, if you want to put yourself in the best position possible to receive all that God has for you, spiritually, in every other way, giving is the way that you put yourself in that. It's a lot like if I said because again, the goal of the series, for your heart to be unburdened. If I went to my doctor and said, my goal is for me to have a healthy heart, what do you tell me to do? to put yourself in the best position, Scott, to have a healthy heart. You need to exercise. You probably need to eat more salads. You need to eat less Little Debbie cakes. Now, does this mean hard and fast that means I'm always going to have a healthy heart? No, because marathon runners drop dead of a heart attack out of nowhere. They're in great shape. But what the doctor is saying, he goes, if you want to put yourself in the best position possible, these are the things that you do. That's what I'm saying to our church when it comes to giving. If your goal is for your heart to be unburdened, giving is the tool that God will use to get you there. It will place you in the best position possible for you to receive the spiritual, material, relational, blessing of God in your life, all the while knowing that there is nothing you have ever done, said, or could possibly do that could ever force God to do anything.
Right. Absolutely.
That's how you stay out of prosperity gospel while still teaching the biblical concept that God responds to faith.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now you brought up faith, and I know we've talked about a little bit about how like the transformed life, when you allow God to really transform your life, then generosity should flow from it. But how does our faith and generosity really go hand in hand? And how does, as our faith grows, how does that change how we give?
Yeah, so here's the tie-in between our faith and giving and all of this. Giving is simply a tangible act of faith, right? That's all that it is. When I say that giving is a tool that the Lord has given us to unburden our hearts, it's a tangible act of faith. It's kind of like for us in ministry, when the Lord called us to ministry and we go, okay, Lord, we're in. And it's like, okay, but what are you actually going to do? You can't just say, yes, I'm in. You have to do something. That's where the rubber meets the road, is that our faith is measured in transformation. And so the whole Christian life is moving us from less and less and less of self to more and more and more of the kingdom and others and of God. And so generosity plays a key role in the development of our faith, because it begins to take the focus off of me and onto other people and onto the kingdom of God. It takes the focus off of the temporary and puts it onto the eternal. It focuses not on the things that will, rust and rust and moths can destroy it and thieves can come and steal it, but in a place and in a situation where it is held by God and where it is sacred and it's going to last. It does all of that. And so giving is simply our faith in action. It's just like love. Generosity, it's just like love. Love, like, you can't just say that you love someone. You show them love. Generosity is the same way. You can't just say that you're a generous person. It will result in you actually giving. And this is the process of how our faith begins to get played out in all the different areas of our life, right? Our obedience, no matter what the command is that we're dealing with or whatever the admonition from the scriptures, our faith is evident not in what we say, but in what we actually do. And so faith and generosity are tied together, because when I'm generous, it's saying, God, I trust you. I trust that you're the one that has given me everything that I have. You're the only reason why I can earn a living, why I have a family, or why I have this job, or why I have the health to do what God, I realize everything I have is from you. So generosity unlocks that faith in that way, where it actually activates it. It goes from me just saying, God, I trust you, to be showing. This is especially important in the Western world, right? So when we go on mission trips to third world countries and stuff, these people know what it's like to actually have to rely on God. And so there's a fervency in their relationship with the Lord, because they're like, I really don't know where my next meal is. For those of us living in the Western world, like if Southridge Church is your home church and you live here in South Charleston, West Virginia, or somewhere in the surrounding area, even the poorest among us, we know at least where to go to get our next meal. And so when you live in such a prosperous and wealthy place as the United States of America, the task that I believe we need to undertake as the church is, if I know honestly where all of my sustenance is going to come from, like I've got a job, like I've got food in the pantry at home, all my needs are taken care of, then it's harder for me to trust God than it is for the person that's in the third world country that doesn't know where the next meal is coming from. And so one of the things that giving does is it allows you to put yourself in a situation where you actually have to depend on the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I go, honestly, with what if my family just took what we made in a given year, our lives would be different than what it is right now, where we are generous to the kingdom of God, right? Our family, like, even though I say like we don't have to, but I'm saying our family lives different because of our decision to put God first in our finances. Because we want to be put into a position where every once in a while we have to go, God, I don't know how you're going to make it happen. I want to see you come through for us. So we're going to give at such a level. Not stupid, not ignorant, and we'll talk about that probably in a couple of weeks, because there is a way that you can give, and you could give a lot, and it's actually not very honoring because it's kind of stupid.
Not wise.
So I'm not saying that you pass into the unwise category, but like giving gives us a chance to go like, you know what, we're going to give. So the way we have to rely on the Lord to figure out something for us in the way that without that, like, no, I know even if I lost my job, I would know where to go and get food. There's social structures here in the United States, and there's ways to get clothes. There's ways to get, like, we have all of that. So even the most destitute among us, like, we know how to get that sort of stuff. And so we're very rarely put in those situations where we go, okay, God, how are you going to come through for me? That's why giving can be so important, is because it can put you, who live very comfortable lives, in positions to actually need the Lord. And that's what your soul needs. Your soul needs dependence upon the Lord. And so if you just live so comfortable in all of your Western wealth, you're not going to know fully what it means to trust in the Lord with all your heart until you put yourself in some sort of situation that you have to rely on Him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point in how we live, because I remember, like, when I waited tables, it was very easy for me to just, if I needed more money, I just picked up an extra shift. And I knew ways around making sure my hours didn't go into overtime to where I could. Like, and it probably wasn't legal, but I did things, I made things work to where I could make the extra money to make ends meet. I do remember times where it was difficult, and I really did have to rely on God, because once I started going back to church, and it was something that I felt God called me to do, was to continue to tithe, which is something that I want you to cover in a second. But it was something where at the end of every shift, I would take my tip money and I would put 10% of that into an envelope, and it did not get touched. And I made sure that no matter what I did, I never pulled back out from that offering or that envelope until I went to church and gave it away. And so that brings up my next question, because, there were some terms that maybe got used in one of the services, like there's stewardship, there's tithing, there's offering. For some of us, we maybe don't know what those terms mean. I know that Anna and I talked a little bit about stewardship last week, but in case you didn't hear that, or maybe you heard it for the first time and you're like, okay, what's stewardship? What's the difference between tithing and offering? Can you help explain those terms and how that all interacts with this?
Yeah, so when we talk about stewardship at the church, we're talking about how God has entrusted us with certain things that we are meant to manage. Right? And listen, this goes all the way back to Genesis. This goes all the way back into the way that we are actually wired as human beings. We are meant to be a steward over all of creation. It's actually wired in us to wisely handle whatever God puts in front of us. So that's what, like, if you go even on generosity and all these things that we're talking about, these are tied into the very way that we are actually created. We were made to reign and rule the created order alongside God. That's what we were created for. So we are stewards at heart. Actually, part of worship is being a good steward because, again, here's our original vocation as far as Genesis is concerned. We were created to reign and rule, take dominion over the created order, and then we would return praises back to God on behalf of the created order. And so all of this is like tied into the imago Dei, the image of God within us. It's who we are. So when we talk about stewardship, we're saying that as the people of God, from the very beginning, you have always been called to take dominion over and manage whatever it is that has been entrusted with you in the same way that God would handle it.
Yeah.
That's stewardship. It is whatever God has given me. Kids, I'm supposed to handle my kids the way that God would handle and manage those kids. If God has given me a home, I'm supposed to manage my home the way that he would manage his home. If God has given me a business or a church to oversee, I am called as a steward to oversee that in the way that God would do it because I'm made in his image.
Yeah.
So all of this is tied in together. So when we say stewardship, that's what we're talking about is the management of whatever God, the wise management of whatever God has given us. And then the other term that was used, the other two terms were tithes and offerings, which again, if you go to most churches, there's someone going to walk up on stage at some point in the service and they're going to go, all right, now it's time to take tithes and offerings. And for most people, they go, oh, that's like the same thing. That's just like the church way of saying time to give our money.
Yeah.
But remember, there's a Jewish backdrop to absolutely everything that we're doing in the church. All the terminology, everything. There's a Jewish backdrop to it. There's a place where all of this came from that as New Testament Christians, we need to wrestle with what does that mean? What does it mean for me? So if you look throughout Israel's history in the Old Testament, the tithe was the amount that all of the people of Israel were required by the law to bring to the temple for the upkeep of the temple and for the for taking care of the Levites, which were the priests and the pastors, essentially. You know, if you want to use a New Testament term, they were the pastors. And so that's what the tithe was meant to do. And then they would be called at different times throughout their calendar to give offerings. Offerings was above and beyond the tithe. And I didn't say this, and I should have. Tithe just means 10%.
Yeah.
So when they were bringing the tithe into the temple, they were bringing 10% of whatever it was. Not, in those times it would have been more agricultural. So it would have been like, well, I have this much grain, and either I sold this grain and then I take 10% of the proceeds, or they could literally just bring 10% of the yield of that crop or whatever it is.
Right.
And as you would see throughout the Old Testament, just the way we understand that, like what we said Sunday about how God returns it, when Israel was faithful in their giving back to the Lord, he was faithful for them to experience good years of crops. Yeah. And as you see, as we get towards the end of the Old Testament, especially in the book of Malachi, this has stopped. And there's going to, the offerings were subpar and all of this. And you get into situations where God actually begins to not send good crops, not send, and so all of the flourishing of Israel was tied to whether or not they were going to be obedient. But again, they're in a blessing and curse covenant. We talk about this all the time at Southridge. So, yes, they were blessed based on whether or not they were obedient or not. We were in a covenant of grace, praise God for that. So that means that whatever God wants to do in our lives, he's allowed to do, both good, bad, and ugly. And none of it is because of anything that we have done. Right. That's a beautiful thing. So that's the tithe. They would bring that in. And then the offering is anything above. So here's what's funny is when you get to a church, they go, all right, it's time to take our tithes and offerings. What they're really when they say tithes and offerings, they're going, we want you to give 10% plus we want you to give over and above. That's what tithes and offerings actually means, which is why we try not to use a lot of that terminology here, because again, church terminology is weird, and especially if we don't understand the Old Testament Jewish backing of all of it, we kind of end up with these jumbled up pictures of this or that. And so if you hear that and you go, okay, so that's what they did in the Old Testament, then what most people will do is they'll go, all right, but we're under grace. You just said we're under grace, so that means that I don't have to tithe. And here's how I always try to push back on this, because if you are making the point that the tithe is an Old Testament term, you're no longer under the law, so you don't have to give 10%. If that's your point, I would tell you you're probably doing that with bad motives. You're doing that because you don't want to be generous, and you're trying to use the Bible as your means for not being generous.
Yeah, which I think goes back to the heart issue at hand,
Yes.
right? Yes.
Generosity is always a heart issue, which is why when people go, yeah, well, tithing's an Old Testament term, and I go, okay, that's true, but let's see what the New Testament has to say.
Yeah.
And what we see that is that when Jesus interacted with the law, never once did he ever take the expectation below the law.
Right.
And that's why when someone comes up and acts like it's like this, like, gotcha, that's an Old Testament term, and I go, I think that you'll probably actually be happier with the Old Testament term than what the New Testament says. The New Testament has to say a lot more about generosity, which is an expectation above the law.
Yeah.
Right? See, in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus says, he's essentially telling the people, he goes, don't pat yourself on the back just because you made it throughout a whole day without killing somebody.
Right.
That's the law. The law is do not kill. He says, but I say unto you, if you've even looked at, or if you have anger in your heart towards someone else, you've already committed murder in your heart.
Yeah.
And he says, don't just pat yourself on the back because you went throughout the day and didn't sleep with someone you're not married to. He says, I say unto you that if you even look at a woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery in your heart. So to this whole, I do kind of love it when people go, well, tithing is an Old Testament term, so we don't have to tithe. And I go, well, that doesn't.
Yeah.
I would say that Jesus took the law and then always raised it. So if you're using I don't have to tithe as then I can just give whatever I want, then you're coming at that with bad motives. Yeah. The way that I would teach this is that the tithe should be, as Mitchell said, the bottom rung of generosity, because that was the law. Jesus always upheld the law and then had us shoot for something higher.
Yeah.
But then, and I say all that, and then I will also completely backtrack, and this is the whole difficult part of it, because if I left it there, some of you would go, okay, well, this feels like we need to do this. But again, then those with bad motives, when I say what I'm getting ready to say next, this will be your excuse to get out of it. Because I will also say, if you just met Jesus, the church does not expect you to have a 10% check or above the next week.
Right.
In fact, that's something that you grow into as God continues to change your life.
Yeah.
You grow into generosity. Just because you got saved and your sin debt got canceled on Sunday doesn't mean that your real debt got canceled on Sunday. You still got to pay your credit card bills, and you got two car payments, and you got a house payment, and you're going, well, we can't do 10%, but now he's saying we got to do at least 10%. You go, no, listen. I believe 10% is a great starting point. I don't think it should be the finishing point, but I also think that 10% should also be, for some people, not their starting point, but their goal. Because for some of you, when you got saved, you were in such bad financial shape. You're going, well, I can't do this right now. Yeah. All right, well, then don't select to do nothing. Do something. And as evidence of your faith, when you can't give at the minimum, do whatever you possibly can to get yourself into a position that you can. Yeah. So God will again, because we're not trying to check boxes. We're trying to create disciples of Jesus. Yes. Meaning, if you can't give what you think is the bare minimum to give, 10% or whatever, if you can't give that, then your act of faith is doing everything you can to get yourself in a position that you can. So your next act of faith and obedience might not be to write a bigger check this Sunday. It might be to sign up for Financial Peace University here at Southridge Church, so the way you can go through a process by which you begin to pay off debt. Maybe right now you need to focus on paying off debt so you can be more generous in 2 years from now. And that's your act. Give something so the way you're in the act of giving, but then get yourself out of debt. Give something and then don't go trade your car in. That might be the most faithful thing you can do to the Lord. Don't go get a new car payment, pay your car off, and drive that thing till the wheels fall off.
Yes.
That could be your act of faith to go, God, I can't get where I know that I need to be. Because I said this in week 1. I believe with everything in me, most people want to be generous. Yeah. These bad motive folks that we're talking about, I don't think that churches are filled with them.
Right.
There's just some of them. But I think some people are so overwhelmed financially that they just go, well, if I can't do this, I'm not going to do anything. No. Yeah. Your act of faithfulness is to give what you can and then work a process to get yourself in better financial shape. So the way then you can give in a way that you're going, wow, I can do this. Yeah. Right? The only option that is not on the table here for you is to do nothing. To do nothing is not an option. If you look at me right now and go, look, all I've got is $10 a week. Great. Give $10 a week and do whatever you have to do to get yourself in better financial shape so that way you can put yourself, as we talked about earlier, in the best position possible for God to bless you.
Yeah.
In whatever way that he wants to do that. So that again, I've talked about this a lot. Don't ever judge a preacher or a sermon or a series based on one sermon because it's a whole nuanced thing that we got 2 more weeks of this that we're going to be fleshing all of this out, and it's very difficult in one sermon to even touch on what we just did here in the last 30 minutes or however long I've been rambling. So that's why it's just pause. If you hear something in a sermon sometimes that maybe you go, oh, I don't know if I like that, or that kind of challenged me, whatever. Pause and know that there's probably a more nuanced answer that we didn't get to in that week, but maybe we will in an extra point, or maybe we will in weeks to come. Yeah. So, those terms, tithes, offerings, and things. So for us, I would say your tithe, whatever that is that you're regular giving. And I hope that you're regularly giving something. That goes to the maintenance of the organization, meaning we have this nice building, we have a staff, we have ministries, we have commitments to ministry partners and different things like that. That's that. And then offerings are above and beyond what that maintenance. So right now we are in the For the Future campaign. The For the Future would be that above and beyond quote unquote offering above the tithe. Or maybe you're taking a beauty day bag right now. That would be a form of an offering. It does not replace your need to help with the expenses of the house. Right. It's above and beyond. Same thing, Impact School boxes. This coming fall, we're going to ask you to fill up a box to feed a local family. That's an offering. That doesn't replace your tithe. So you can't go like, well, I'm going to do 10 boxes, then I don't have to give to the church. Right. No. Give to the church whatever it is that God is leading you. And then those things are offerings above and beyond. And so the goal is let's get to where we're giving regularly, and then we can worry about offerings. That's what Mitchell was talking about when he said you can't give an offering until you tithe. That's what he's saying. Yes. I know that's language that we're not always accustomed to. That's what he's saying. Get that regular rhythm of whatever that is for you. If it is 10%, praise God. If it's 5%, praise God. But do some sort of percentage giving that allows you to grow as you grow. Make it regular. I still remember my first time giving regularly was $30 a paycheck. $30 a paycheck. I can't remember if it was weekly or bi-weekly, but that's what it was. And honestly, that was 10%. I was making like $300 whenever I was making a paycheck. I made like $300. So $30 was a lot of money for me at that moment. But what happened was I built the discipline off of $30 to where now I can give what I'm able to give now. And so when you flex that muscle, it's like when you go to the gym. When I was curling 10-pound dumbbells, after a while it got easy, and then I could do the 20s, and then after a while I could do the 25s. Generosity is a muscle that builds. So don't just self-select out because of where you're currently at. Opt in, do something that stretches you and challenges you. Again, don't just settle for the bare minimum. Do something that stretches you. And if you're not in great financial shape, do something that will help you get in better financial shape so that way you can get your heart unburdened and get yourself in the best possible position to experience all that God has for you.
Absolutely.
That's what we were trying to say. here at Southwood Church. I hope that that message reaches you wherever you're at. But that's our heart. That's why we had Pastor Mitch come talk about giving, is that giving is so essential to our goal of your heart being unburdened and you experiencing God's best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes into the examples he gave at the end about the different measurements in which you give. That, you know, if you give with a teaspoon, you receive with a teaspoon. You give with a shovel, you receive with a shovel. Those kind of things is, you know, it's really a measure of your faith that you're giving.
Yes.
Right. And but some people might hear that and think, well, if I want a shovel back, I give with I give more to get more back. And they might feel as though that's, you know, back to what we were talking about earlier, prosperity, gospel-y things. But how is that actually more of a kingdom principle and not prosperity talk?
Yeah, all throughout the scriptures, you can see this principle that when you give whatever it is to God, you get it back. Like it comes back in some way. It's not dollar for dollar.
Yes.
We're very quick in the modern church, because we're so sensitized to this topic, to call everything prosperity preaching. Oh, that's prosperity preaching. Well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Prosperity preaching is, if I sat here and told you, if you'll give us $1,000 right now, the Lord is going to send you $10,000 by the end of the week. That's prosperity preaching. Kingdom principle is Galatians 6. Whatever you reap, you will sow. Is that simply financial? No, that means if you go out and sow foolishness, you're going to reap foolishness. It also means that if you sow blessing, you should expect to reap blessing. There's a kingdom principle behind that, but it's not a 1-for-1 ratio. It's not, and so again, here's what we're trying to say with the spoons and the shovels and all of this. If you want to put yourself in the best position to receive all that God has for you, then do not settle for the bare minimum. That's it. That's all it is. Yeah. Again, because when you start looking at those visualizations, you start thinking, oh, man, I got to have a dump truck load of money. No, listen. Pastor Mitch mentioned this story. We might get to this later in the series. I don't know fully where we're headed. But there was a woman who gave 2 coins called mites. They equal less than a penny in the American economy. Jesus looks at that woman and says she gave more than everyone else. As the rich came in, dumped their offering in, she gave more. Why? Well, that looks like a teaspoon. It wasn't. It was because kingdom principle is not the amount; it's the proportion.
Yes.
This is the message I've been trying to get to our church for a while now. It's because we have people in our church that you make $60,000 a year, and you give $4,000 of it away. That's generous. It's not quite to the tithe, but that's generous. We also have people here that make $250,000 a year, and you give $3,000 away. That's not generous. Right. In fact, at $250,000, if you did the 10%, you did the $25,000. You need $225,000 to live on. It still doesn't seem that generous, does it?
Right.
It's not the amount; it's the proportion. Right? There's people that are barely scraping by, but they're giving what they can. And if you stacked their offering up next to someone else's offering, it wouldn't look. But when you stacked the widow's offering up next to all the other people's offering, it didn't look like much. But in her heart, she gave all that she had. They gave, the scripture says, out of their wealth. We talked about this in the first week. If you give simply out of your abundance, you'll never actually feel the effects of that giving. Until giving feels like a sacrifice, it will not be the tool that unburdens your heart. And so that's why the New Testament principle of generosity does not deal in percentages or in amounts, even though percentages, I think, help you give you a guidepost. It's not about that. It's about the heart behind it. It's about how much do I really need to live off of? How much is enough? It's like the old John D. Rockefeller quote. Someone asked him, big oil tycoon, how much is enough? He says, just $1 more. Right? There was no end to what he, and that's how most people are. It's like, okay, when will you start being generous? Oh, when I get that promotion, I'll start being. No. Listen, train your heart while it's easy.
Yeah.
Because someday really never comes.
Right.
Oh, when we get that thing paid, when we get that taken care of, when the kids are out of the house, and all you'll do is if your income raises, if you don't have a heart that is trained in generosity, if your income raises, you go, oh, that's when we'll start giving. No, what you'll do, you'll raise your level of living to match your level of income. You will not raise your level of giving if you don't do it now. All you'll do is raise your level of living and not your level of giving.
Yeah.
And so that's how we stay away from prosperity preaching. Is not everything that says if you give, you get something back is prosperity preaching.
Right.
That's actually kingdom principle.
Yeah.
It's just we have to be very nuanced when we say whatever comes back, we're not really in control of what it is.
Right.
But we do know that God takes care of his people.
Yeah.
Which is where we're headed this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, there you have it. Giving is a tangible representation of your faith, and it sets you up for the best possible outcome to receive God's blessings. And so we just challenge you that if you're not giving, go ahead and start somewhere. And if it seems impossible, figure out those next steps to be able to start giving somewhere. We hope this is helpful to you and beneficial to you. Share it with someone who maybe has some questions about giving, and be back here again next week for another Extra Point with more practical next steps for your faith journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.